Good evening, ladies and gentle dudes. My name is Kyle, and welcome to the Lynam podcast. This is going to be the first episode. I'm very excited to start this. Thing is that, I do a lot of film reviews and stuff like that. Used to create a lot of gaming videos and everything. Frankly, it's just been too difficult for me to keep going down that path at this point in time. I'm going to try and put film reviews out every so often, but I wanted another outlet just to talk about movies in a little bit more of a freeform style. My videos are already like 20 minutes fucking long, so I figure a podcast is a great way to talk about movies and media and just things that I enjoy in general and branch out and talk about music and games and everything. I did not script this at all. I don't believe in scripting things like this too often. I have a set of notes and just general things I want to talk about, but actually scripting it out just seems a little bit too stilted. I can't get a conversational flow out of a lot of the things that I write for myself. I could tell other people what to say and how to say it. That's a big part of being a director, which I consider myself. I've directed a few different shorts, but personally, I'm not a good actor, really. So let's get into it. I figured it would be fun to kick it off and do a best and worst of 2017 list. It's not really in a particular order or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking about the things that I enjoyed last year and things I didn't enjoy last year. So, we're going to be talking about movies. We're going to be talking about TV shows, games, CDs, all that good shit. So to kick it off, I figured I'd talk about the TV shows first, because I've been watching way too much fucking TV lately. Just like an ungodly amount of TV at times. And so, one of my favorite shows previously, 2016, was Stranger Things. And of course, this year we got Stranger Things 2, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit skeptical at first. I was super stoked for Stranger Things 2, but I was just really concerned that it was going to go down this path that I wasn't looking forward to. And thank God they pulled it off. At least for me. I know some people were pissed off about Stranger Things 2, and particularly there was one episode where 11, meets somebody else who has powers, and it was like this weird like X-Men thing. I dug it a lot, but a lot of people were like, I don't fucking like that shit. And that was just, the Duffer Brothers branching out and trying something else. And I think for the most part it worked. It kind of felt like, one of those episodes where it's a pilot that they just kind of snuck in there. But at the same time, it worked a lot better than I thought. Overall, Stranger Things 2 was just really a fun ride because we got to spend more time with these characters that we had already built a relationship with. We got a bunch of new characters in the show that really added some extra depth, and we really got a big expansion of the Upside Down. I'm sure most people that are going to be listening to this either know me or they know nothing about me. But one thing that's always super important to me when I'm watching any piece of media is the world building. And does it feel, real? Does it feel like it's something that could does it feel like it's something that's plausible? Does the art direction match, what they're trying to go for? Are the rules established well? Things like that. And Stranger Things 2 really nailed that. Every single sequel in the 80s took the core premise of the first movie and blew it out to just this ridiculous size. Same thing happened here, and they pulled it off. I was really impressed, and I can't wait to see where Stranger Things 3 and 4 go. There was a lot of still loose threads, I think, that most people, they're probably going to be analyzing for a while. It was also a nice self-contained arc. It wasn't one of these things where you were really craving more out of the story and it was missing things and they didn't, give you a good payoff. I would have liked to see a little bit more of 11, honestly. I wish that she had been able to interact with, her friends a little bit more and a little sooner, personally. But, I mean, that's such a small gripe, and I understand why they decided to keep her separate from the other cast, kind of really change things up and, delve more into her character without having to shoehorn these other kids in there. It was just her and the sheriff. Also, R.I.P. Bob. That was really fucked up. I don't think they needed to linger on Bob getting mauled by a fucking Demogorgon for like 20 minutes. That's, it's sad, man. I don't want to see, fucking Sean Austin, Rudy, Samwise Gamgee. I don't want to see him get mauled to death by a Demogorgon. But that's what I got. Overall, Stranger Things 2, if you haven't seen it yet, it's pretty awesome. Sorry for minor spoilers. Again, this is super freeform. The next show that I wanted to talk about, Netflix was just fucking killing it this year. Okay, they put out an insane amount of stuff that was super high quality and honestly took a lot more of my time than most standard network shows, or something that was on cable like HBO. I mean, of course there's been some good things, but Netflix just fucking put out so much original content this year that's kind of staggering. So of course we got Defenders, which was pretty interesting. It's not the greatest of the Marvel Netflix shows, I'm gonna be honest, but I did like to see the culmination of these stories, seeing Jessica Jones and Daredevil and Luke Cage and Iron Fist team up. And it was a good 8 episodes. It wasn't too long. It wasn't too short. And it was, pretty much what you expect. I mean, it felt like Daredevil season 2.5 because they focused a lot on Matt Murdock and his struggles. But he kind of should have been the way in, because he's the one that introduced us to this street level universe of vigilantes. And I thought that worked really well. Of course, we also had each of these characters have their own contained story arcs. And what I really loved was that they took their time to actually define the style of the characters. They tried to match as closely as possible the feel of each show when we stepped into another character's arc. And so when they meet, then it's just really interesting to see those styles kind of start to blend. Their personalities came through in the cinematography and the way that they were written, of course. It was really emphasized in the Defenders because you would just go from one character to another, and it would feel like you were watching 2 different shows, but it was a smooth transition. The Hand, where I wish they had done a little bit more with them. I wish the villain overall was a little bit more compelling, but I mean, nothing's perfect. And honestly, I'm just glad that Defenders was good because I tried to watch Iron Fist. I watched like 3 or 4 episodes and I just fucking gave up because it was garbage. It was just hot garbage. It was boring. The fight choreography was horrible. The main character was horrible. And they kind of apologized for that with Defenders, everybody was taking a shit on Iron Fist, and everybody does that in the Defenders. They're like, what's your fucking problem, dude? Like, just getting on his case about being just this, privileged white kid who doesn't have any training or anything. Well, I mean, he has training, but he acts like he doesn't, And so it was really funny to see these people that are constantly, getting beat down and really going into these really brutal situations. And they're just like, dude, like, you need to step it up. Like, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to become a part of this team and work better. So that was really nice that we got that out of the show. Of course, there is a caveat. I mean, if you haven't seen Defenders yet, you kind of have to watch all of the other Marvel Netflix shows. Barring Iron Fist, you might want to watch a couple of episodes of Iron Fist just so you understand who he is as a character. And of course, there are some elements that carry over from Iron Fist. I didn't look up the synopsis. I figured out what they were talking about pretty quickly. Every development that happened in Iron Fist, they kind of go through it in Defenders. So it's like you can watch a couple episodes, get a feel for who Danny Rand is as a character, and then just move straight into Defenders if you've watched the other shows. Also on that front, Punisher dropped. I was shocked. Punisher dropped last year, towards the tail end of the year. I wasn't expecting it to come out that soon. And I'm just happy that it did because The Punisher was my favorite part of Daredevil Season 2. I think that John Bernthal is a fantastic actor when he's given the right material, and Punisher is the perfect character for him to portray because he's complex and he's angry and he's trying to get a hold of his life, and is very similar to some of the other characters that John Bernthal's played in the past. But he was actually given more time to breathe, like even with Shane in The Walking Dead, didn't get enough time to really understand Shane fully as a character. And it kind of sucked when he died, frankly. And that's not how it should have been based off of those comics. But Punisher really, really was a nice showcase for him. Of course, the action was brutal. They did a lot of shit that I would not expect a show that was, produced by Disney to do. I wouldn't say it's not groundbreaking. It's still not as brutal as some of the other Punisher movies, especially Warzone. But there's some pretty hardcore shit going on in this show, and I was just kind of shocked by it. And I was happy, too, because it was like they didn't want to dilute their version of the Punisher. They wanted to modernize it and make it its own thing, providing an origin story without having to provide a full origin story, which was nice. We got his origin in Daredevil Season 2, and then we, padded out a little bit more with Punisher. All I'm hoping is that when we go into Punisher Season 2, that we get a little bit more action, a little bit more of the Punisher being a active protagonist instead of somebody who's kind of passive and kind of forced back into being a Punisher, because I feel like him as a character, there's a point where like he doesn't take a lot of pleasure in what he's doing, but at a certain point he does. And it's like the only thing that's kind of keeping him all together is being a vigilante and straight up murdering people. And, there's a thin line because you don't want to portray him as a psychopath that's irredeemable. But at the same time, that's kind of who the Punisher is at his core. And I think they struck a nice balance with this season. I just want to see a little bit more action next time around. Other than that, I guess I'm going to stick with the Netflix shows. I was going to go over to something else. But Glow. Glow was really cool. I wasn't expecting anything. I had heard a little bit about it before it dropped. And then, one day I just started watching the episodes and I just fell in love with the show. So if you haven't heard about Glow, it's actually partially based on a true story. It's about I think it's the Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling. So it's this wrestling league that was started in the 1980s to kind of compete with WWE at that point it was WWF and WCW and all that shit. But it was strictly women, which is pretty interesting. And of course it's got Allison Brie in it as the main character. She's fantastic. If you've seen Community, she plays a drastically different character than Annie. Her character is, she's a mess. She doesn't have everything together. She's out of a job, and she kind of takes this wrestling thing because it's the only acting job that she can find right away. She's a struggling actress she's not crazy, but she's not altogether there. And then, of course, she has a best friend, and all this shit just she becomes a magnet for all this horrible stuff, She attracts awful situations into her life, and she kind of causes them herself. And it just really slowly starts to snowball as the show progresses until, it causes a gigantic fucking avalanche. And I thought it was really interesting. Every character is pretty well developed. It's got Mark Maron in it, which I thought is fantastic. I love Mark Maron, and I don't see him acting in enough stuff. I want to see more of him acting. And it's a really solid period piece. The art design and direction is flawless. You watch it and it feels like you're transported back to the 80s. But I mean, Glow is just fantastic. You just have to watch it, and you'll figure out if it's your cup of tea really quickly. I personally can't wait for season 2. It's going to be really good, and it's just it's heartwarming, it's sad, it's funny. It is an extremely varied show with a lot of heart, and it just shines through, and I loved it. The other one that I want to talk about is American Vandal. This one came out of nowhere, okay? It's the funniest fucking thing I have seen in a long time, and it just came out of fucking left field. Like, I saw a trailer for this, and I thought it was an April Fool's Day joke from Netflix. And then, like, I want to say a couple weeks later, the show was actually on Netflix, and I was shocked. What American Vandal is a documentary or a mockumentary series that's supposed to look like Making a Murderer or The Jinx or any of these, investigative discovery, like murder mystery docudrama shows. But the premise, the main plot point is that there was this kid that got falsely accused, so he claims, of drawing a bunch of dicks on cars as a part of the senior prank. And they don't have security camera footage of what happened. And so it's this guy in AV club in a high school trying to piece together the story of what happened and trying to figure out whether or not this guy actually drew all these penises on cars. And it's so fucking funny. Like, of course it's like a one note joke at first, but they find different ways to tweak it and just make it interesting every time. It actually has a lot of depth in the mystery. Like, you would expect, okay, well, clearly this guy drew a bunch of fucking dicks on cars. Like, who else could it possibly be? But then, they go, oh, well, this dick doesn't look the same as the ones that he draws on his notebooks and this and that. And like, they sit there and they actually go through the evidence and they make it like one of these docu shows, where you're not getting all the pieces right away. And I love how also it doesn't break the fourth wall, but you can tell that Peter Maldonado, the fake kid that's making this show, he's not being as objective as he could be, and you kind of see that slip through the cracks every once in a while, which it's just great. I don't want to spoil anything else about it. You just got to watch it. Super funny. Really engaging. It's one of those shows that you'll just binge watch through, and then you'll be sitting there and you're like, oh my god, did I just watch 5 episodes back to back? Because they always end on some like massive cliffhanger, and then you're like, I've got to figure out what happens next. And any show that can pull that off with such a stupid premise is an A+ in my book. So definitely check that out. It's getting a season 2 somehow. Stoked about that. So we'll see where it goes from there. BoJack Horseman dropped another season this year. I was kind of behind on it, so I had to watch through season that came out, I think, last year as well, and then get into this one. I mean, at this point, BoJack Horseman, if you haven't seen it, it's about an alcoholic horse who's a sitcom star, or who was a former sitcom star, and he's kind of trying to piece his life back together and get his fame back. And I gotta be honest, man, this season was like some of the darkest and saddest stuff that I've ever seen. It really hit me at my core. Dealt with a lot of issues that I found relevant in my life. Just, trying to find your place in the world and trying to avoid falling into a pit of, substance abuse or depression or anything like that. It's a show that you have to be emotionally equipped to watch, which is weird because it's a show about a fucking talking horse, and it's a cartoon. But it's one of those few animated shows that really pushes the line. Of course, it's funny, but you're gonna go through a lot of shit watching the show. Like personally, I mean, I'm sure there's a few times where I actually started to cry while I was watching it because it's just it can be very depressing. So just know that going in, if you're curious about BoJack Horseman. What I do love about it though is that it's an animated show where it's not serialized, but when characters do something, it actually carries over from episode to episode. In a lot of these animated shows, characters do shit and it just doesn't matter. Like, even when South Park started serializing their stuff, none of the big things that happen to those characters would continue. And that's because if you want a successful show like that, usually the characters don't grow or they don't change or they just become more elevated versions of certain personality traits. Whereas BoJack, you see how he's kind of destroying the lives of those around him and stuff, and it's pretty interesting to watch. It's a real fascinating character study. It's a lot better than Will Arnett's other show on Netflix, Flaked. Flaked isn't horrible. It deals with a lot of the same things, but personally I think that BoJack Horseman has a better way of tackling those same things, and it's light and it's funny at times, but it's not afraid to go places that you probably don't want to go. And I think that's why it's really important it's an important show to watch, especially if you're at a dark place in your life and you want to see how you might be coming off to other people without, because sometimes, we need a mirror to reflect what's going on in our own life. And this is one of those shows that, showed me, it's like, you could be this dude. Like, this is a dark path. You don't want to be that guy. Yeah, so I'm getting too off topic there. But it's great. It's a great show. You should check it out. Of course, then we have Master of None, which is Aziz Ansari's show. It just dropped its second season earlier this year. Of course, it's fantastic. Everything that Aziz Ansari does is always really funny, always pretty poignant. Master of None, especially now with... God damn it, I didn't want to talk about this. But I think it's really important to address, especially with all these fucking people in the industry doing all these awful things, sexually assaulting people and harassing them and just treating people like dog shit. When I heard about Louis C.K., I mean, there were rumors about it for years, and I had heard about it, but until, people actually came out and said something, I was kind of blind to it. And Master of None is very similar to Louis in a lot of ways, but I think that it's actually a lot more accessible to audiences, and it doesn't come off as this kind of sad guy just talking about how fucking pathetic he is, which is how I view Louis now. It has a completely different frame of reference now that all this stuff has come out, and all the weird shit that he would do in the show is like, I feel like a lot of those situations mirrored his own life, and it's kind of creepy. Whereas with Master of None, it's Aziz Ansari's character is not, he's a loser, and he embraces it, but he's not, this pathetic sad man. Like, he has goals and aspirations, and he tries to be his best self, and he goes through a lot of things that a lot of people go through. This is another show that really hit home for me, especially There's one episode in particular that just fucking it broke my heart because I mean, navigating personal relationships and stuff is tough, and there's one episode that encapsulates a relationship that everybody's gone through in this season, and it deals with sex. There's episodes that deal with sexuality. There's episodes that deal with technology and dating. There's episodes that deal with careers and where you're going with your life. It is a very relevant show. That's what I've been trying to say. It's a very relevant take on what it's like to be somebody, a millennial, more or less, or somebody that's kind of transitioning into their 30s, or they're in their mid 20s. It's super relevant, and it's again a funny show, beautifully shot. Of course, some of the actors aren't amazing. Like I feel like Aziz Ansari's parents in the show are pretty horrible actors, but you get over it. It wasn't something that like bothered me so much that I couldn't watch the show, but it was distracting, and you get used to them. They do have very distinct personalities. They're just not good actors, and it's possible that it's his actual parents. I don't know. I haven't researched it, which would explain a lot. So Master of None. Be prepared for some real shit, but definitely a show that you should check out. If you're a fan of his stand-up, if you're a fan of Louis, but you just refuse to watch it after the fucking shit that he did, this is a good alternative, and I think it's a lot more relevant to younger people than Louis is. All right, I got two more shows on my list of shows this year. I don't even know how I'm gonna get through fucking movies. I might have to break this up because this is a lot of stuff. The next thing that I've got on here is Game of Thrones. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and Game of Thrones season 7 finally dropped, and I am so hype. I'm so hyped for next season already because this is the beginning of the end. Just crazy shit happening all the time. I honestly thought a lot of characters, a lot more characters were gonna die. There's some shocking moments, but it is a lot of setup. So it's like it does feel like it's the first half. It feels like it's a 2-part season, which it pretty much is. It reminds me a lot of when Breaking Bad was going into its final season, and they split it up and made people wait a year and a half for the other 8 fucking episodes, and they just left Hank sitting on the toilet. That's what I feel like right now. I feel like Hank's sitting on the toilet, and I gotta wait until 2019 for Game of Thrones season 8 to come out. You already know what Game of Thrones is. Don't fucking tell me you don't, because that's bullshit. There's dragons, there's fucking ice zombies, there's magic, there's people getting resurrected from the dead, there's people getting their heads smashed in. It's awesome. It's fucking awesome, and I can't wait for the next season. That's it. I don't need to talk about spoilers or anything. If you watch Game of Thrones, you already know what's up. If you don't watch Game of Thrones, get fucking on it. And if you're not sure about Game of Thrones, maybe go watch some clips. Don't spoil all the big moments. Go watch the Viper versus the Mountain. And then, because that's what got me into the show. I saw that fight and I was like, I have to watch this. And then after that, now I'm 7 seasons in. I can't not watch it at this point. Do yourself a favor, go watch that. Final show that I have on this list is Rick and Morty season 3. Now, here's the thing. I am a huge Rick and Morty fan. Probably my favorite animated TV show at the moment. But I hate calling myself a Rick and Morty fan because I do not want to be associated with the fucking people that watch this show and are just obnoxious about it. Obviously, I know a lot of people that like Rick and Morty, and they're not crazy, but I'm not one of those people that runs around saying, wubba lubba dub dub, or a pickle Rick. It's fucking annoying, okay? And I was just embarrassed, dude. Like, I had to stop talking about this show for months after the fucking Szechuan sauce thing because there were people jumping up on counters in McDonald's and just making other people's lives hell over some fucking shitty sauce and just acting like garbage and thinking that they're better than people. You know, if you watch Rick and Morty, that's awesome. You're not better than anybody, okay? I just want to clarify that. I don't care who you are. You watch the show, you're not better or smarter than anybody that doesn't watch the show. That being said, this season was pretty good. It wasn't the best though. I feel like because there was so much time between season 2 and season 3, kind of fell off, and you can kind of see where Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon had some issues with each other, and the show is kind of a mixed bag this season. Like, I'm still gonna watch the shit out of it, probably gonna buy it on Blu-ray at some point if I can, but I would say that this is the weakest season out of the 3, even though there are some fantastic episodes tucked in there. And I think the big reason was because they had pretty much gotten rid of Jerry for most of the season. And you don't think you'll miss Jerry, but once they get rid of him, you're like, yeah, I need Jerry back. So that was a big thing. It does, it's like, it's tough too, because it's hard not to get repetitive with this show and hit a lot of those same beats and get kind of tired of Rick talking about how fucking miserable life is all the time. But at the same time, it's still funny. There's still interesting moments here, and there's still it's still clever. Honestly, I like it more than Community, although Community is one of my favorite shows of all time too. But I think that Rick and Morty is just something special because I love how they parody other things in sci-fi. Like the Mad Max episode was fun. I love that in the past they've done things like Jurassic Park and The Purge and just a bunch of just referencing things in the pop culture stratosphere and coming up with a bunch of stupid shit, but also trying to make it work. The science of the show is bullshit, but it sounds like it works. It's kind of like that Star Trek thing where it's like, oh, we have to calibrate the refractor beams so that we can engage the warp drive into pattern 6 or whatever the fuck they're gonna say. Like Rick and Morty, they have plausible explanations for certain things, and then they'll go and they'll have a fucking plumbus. So that's what I like about the show, is that it's not afraid to be insanely stupid, but it doesn't treat its audience like idiots. And I really hope that Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland recognize that and don't change anything, don't do anything to appease those fucking fans that are just super into saying these dumb catchphrases. Because that's another thing. The catchphrases, the whole point of those was them saying, oh, fucking catchphrases are stupid. We're going to make fun of people, like shows that have catchphrases. And then they became actual catchphrases. That kind of sums up what the fan base is like right now. And it's really hard to talk about it with certain people. I can't, go out there and just be like, hey, I'm a Rick and Morty fan. I know that sounds stupid, but it's kind of true. It is kind of true. Because then they're going to be like, oh, well, you're one of those people. I'm not. That about covers it for the TV shows. So I think that this is a good point to stop. And then we're going to go into best and worst movies of 2017. So I'm just going to break this up. So it's actually going to be a few different episodes. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. I could have talked about worst TV, but honestly, I didn't see a lot of really bad TV shows because when I watch something on TV that sucks, I just shut it off. I don't watch it again. Kind of pointless. Of course, there's some disappointing stuff. Honestly, I wasn't a fan of the new season of Orange is the New Black. I thought it was kind of weak and a little bit ham-fisted. It mainly had to do with the approach. But, other than that and, Iron Fist, there wasn't enough to really make that its own thing. We're going to be talking about best and worst movies next time. If you enjoyed the podcast, please, subscribe. Of course, I've got plenty of different channel links. I'm going to go ahead and put those in the description or whatever. follow me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Lynam Up Productions. Really simple. If you just type that in, should be one of the first things that pops up, if not the only thing that pops up. As well as, I've got Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. My handle is manual_elk, like manual, like on a skateboard. And yeah, I will see you in the next episode.